I'm Anthony Shu. I'm a content engineer for us at Vercel. Fun fact, I used to play professional baseball. So on the right there, if any of you are baseball fans, I made it up to AAA with the Cardinals. So there you go. But today, I'm an engineer by trade. While I was playing baseball, I taught myself to program, and I've been writing JavaScript and TypeScript for about 6-7 years now. And I'm learning Rust in my spare time. And I'm in our marketing department for us here at Vercel, though. So I feel like, bring a really interesting perspective to, getting to bring a technical head to our, folks that don't have that technical background, and that boots on the ground experience of writing code every day. And, getting to have that experience for that part of the organization. So trying to connect the dots for folks is really interesting for me. And so, yeah, that's a little about me. But we're here for Next.js 13, right? So here's my big idea on what makes Next.js 13 blazingly fast. Trademark, of course. I love those vibes. But here's my big idea, right? Next.js 13, I can draw clear lines between developer experience, that end user experience, and your business goals. We can, by leveraging Next.js, putting it in the middle of this, of course, I had to do a triangle. We can leverage Next.js to bring together the core feedback loops of your digital strategy and really make that digital strategy that you've developed everything, and get it to do everything that you want it to do, right? None of these points of this triangle exist in a vacuum. And sometimes we let those silos get built up where we don't think of these things as interrelated. But, no matter what role you have at your company today, those points of that triangle interact with each other. Your job might even exist at several different points of that triangle. So it's really important to understand that, when we make a DX improvement, we probably are making a UX improvement. And when we do that, we can address KPIs with those numbers and really understand the connection between all of those different things. But what's the undercurrent here, right? Like, why would I even care about this in the first place? So what's the deal here? And ultimately, it's that speed matters, right? With Vercel and Next.js, we can unlock the potential of that digital strategy, like I said. And this slide might seem obvious for a few of you out there, but it's really nice to have this solid backdrop as we move this discussion forward. If you're going to compete today, and time is going to be of the essence, there's, of course, all sorts of factors that go into building a great business. But if you're going to compete in the digital marketplace, making sure that you're properly taking care of performance within your digital strategy is going to be key. And that means much more than just those final page loading times, right? We need to make sure that we have our developer experience right, so that we can iterate quickly. And once we have that, we can make those small incremental changes that add up over time to create better page performance. And then we can track those pages over time with real users as they use our apps out in the wild with Vercel Analytics. Our developers with the right tooling can be empowered to create real change for our users, and in turn our business at the end of the day. Once we have that improved performance, we can start impacting those KPIs so that our graphs are going, up and to the right, maybe down and to the right, depending on the graph, right? But they're going to be going the direction we want them to go, as long as we start with that correct developer experience and move it through everything that we're doing. We're really invested in this idea. Vercel is developer focused, developer obsessed, really. And that's why we acquired Split B, so that we can have those first party privacy friendly analytics. And today you can use audiences if no matter what plan you're on, and check out your page traffic, your user devices, your user locations, and understand how your page performance is impacting those page views and all the experiences that you're creating. You can visit vercel.com/analytics for more on those things. But don't take my word for it, right? This speed really does matter. I'm just me. Let's take it from Google and Deloitte, shall we? Milliseconds mean millions. You may have stumbled across this study. Thank you, Amy. She's given you the links there in the chat. Milliseconds make millions, right? This is a study that, as I said, Google and Deloitte did in 2020. I know I've heard for years now the X seconds more of load time loses Y sales on Amazon.com or something like that. But we've got some updated guidance now, and we're actually seeing that these numbers are even more profound than we knew about. There's a lot more to this study than is on this slide, and I've only grabbed enough here to drive my point home so that we can keep going. But these changes are profound, not only from a KPI standpoint, but they also draw back to just genuinely better UX. And this is really a win-win-win scenario that we can create when we bring in that developer side of things that enabled all of this stuff to happen. So bringing it back to Next.js, why do I think Next.js is the right approach here? Well, there's a lot to love about Next.js, I know. If you've gotten to play with Next.js before, then you're familiar with all these features. If you're not, I encourage you to go to vercel.com/new. You can have a globally distributed deployment of Next.js in the next like 2.5 minutes. And it'll be connected to your Git provider of choice. It's something else. I don't know. Every time I do it, I just like have a nerd moment and just like step back and I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And another thing about that I think Next.js is a great choice for this is I've only been working for Vercel for 4 or 5 months or so. But I didn't really recognize the truly massive scales that Next.js operates at. There's tons of globally recognizable brands that are built on Next.js, and it's amazing to learn how Next.js has been scaling for those firms. And I had only used, I was running a client, an agency on the side. And so I had only had like medium range, even small scale code bases that I was working in. But I think it really speaks to the developer experience, how fluidly Next.js scales small, medium, large as far as those things go. So again, vercel.com/new is a great place to, experience that firsthand. So moving to Next.js 13, getting more specifics about our punchline, our title card, right? Just for those of you real quick, the developers in my audience that are on Next.js 12 right now, you want to get to 13. A couple quick things to note here. You don't need to be afraid to make this update, I promise. You probably can get it done today, depending on the size of your code base. That might be a little ambitious, but I know I can say that I've moved over, again, agency stuff. I've moved over probably half of my clients to Next.js 13. We've got a few code mods in the docs for you that address the several actual code changes that you do have to make to get from 12 to 13. Those two things off the top of my head that I am trying to remember right are the next image component. It has a few updated props. We'll talk about this in a couple slides. And the next link component no longer requires an A tag inside of it. So those code mods will go ahead and rewrite that stuff for you. And so those are the only major code changes you'll see as far as I'm familiar with. There's some other things in there that you guys can go ahead and check out in the docs. But after that, everything else is optional. The pages directory is business as usual. The app directory is in beta, totally optional and incrementally adoptable, which, by the way, that incremental adoptable approach there, again, I actually had a client that I went and just used the app directory for fun just because I could. And I realized, that was a really nice opportunity to start making that change. But it's nice to understand, that I can make that change in a low risk way. I don't have to just pick up my entire code base and put it in the app directory. So that was really nice for me to learn about and really experience firsthand. So that incremental approach is really, really nice. I'm seeing some questions here. Hasn't worked for you, but it seems it's because you're running code on an M1. I believe you're talking about the code mods that I was mentioning. I would be surprised if an M1 wasn't working out for you. If you're having a problem with those code mods, go ahead and start up a discussion in the Next.js GitHub repo. I'm sure the team will get to you really quickly on these code mods because they want to have them right. So an issue or discussion there would probably go a long way for them if you're having problems. And they tend to reach out pretty quickly. They're pretty on the spot there. Is there a timeline for when an app will come out of beta? I'm actually not aware of. I should have looked that up before I started this. I'm actually not aware of one. I would be willing to bet that there are some known quantities there, but I'm not going to speak out of turn. Sorry. And I'm also seeing a question around TurboPack. Let me address a TurboPack question at the end, just so that we don't lose context here. I'm going to move to my next slide here. And it's that with Vercel and Next.js, your brand has never been stronger. We've set this scene. We want to go fast in all stages of the game. We're going to do it with Next.js. So let's get some actionable intel that we can use to start putting your brand first on your digital properties. We're going to establish great performance for fonts and images. We're going to create an opportunity for better engagement on your social and link shares, which I'm really excited about that one, to be honest with you. And we're going to open the door for putting your brand first on those digital properties. So first things first, let's speak your brand, right? With the next font package, we can make the right first impression with zero layout shift. As you can see on this page that I have here on the slide, we have a pretty text heavy hero image there, right? And that's pretty common, right? There's going to be some text that is going to pop in above the fold. Your user is going to see that. Well, if those text elements are flickering through your fallback fonts, or while your primary font hasn't loaded in yet, we can end up with that flickering sensation, and it's not pleasant, of course. And typography is key to your brand. You'd want to bring your typography to your pages in a way that is helpful instead of hurtful, right? And so the next font component will work with custom or Google Fonts. You can bring it in from your public folder, from a remote source, and those fonts, this component will prevent any of that layout shift. We've taken all of the standards that you've had to run through with that code to get your font faces working correctly. We've just wrapped it up and made it so that you can write, I think it's like 6 lines, and all of a sudden now you've got all your fonts handled. They'll be hosted on your domain when your Next.js application builds, and you're going to see better performance and increased security. Believe it or not, there actually is security vulnerabilities that you can introduce around importing a font. Kind of silly, but I've actually seen it before. This works in both the apps and pages directories. And so now when we remove the opportunity for these fonts to be flickering, all of a sudden we've created an environment where your brand is speaking first thing, right? The page that you're looking at here is vercel.com/solutions/Next.js. And on this page, like I said, we've got a lot of text here. And as you scroll down, there's a lot more information, more text. And if we link to somebody here, we don't want them to be like, whoa, 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 what's going on as these fonts come in. Instead, we want them to instantly absorb our brand. I think I don't have it handy, but there's a lot of stuff. There's been work done to show that folks, when they visit a web page, they make split-second decisions about whether they like this page or not, and whether they're going to hit that buy button eventually. And so this by itself can have serious impacts as far as conversion rates and getting everything to work correctly. I'm seeing in the chat using Next font on 12 and love it. That's awesome, James. I love hearing that. Yeah, it's the opportunities that I've had to go ahead and use this component. I've really appreciated it, because I know I can speak for myself personally. Every time I've tried to set up a custom font, I do it wrong the first time. It's super annoying. I wasted an entire day setting up a font, but now I can just do it in 6 lines and I don't have to really think about it. So of course, I'm thinking especially of press and like media here, where we have articles that come in. This is, of course, getting your typography right is, of course, a good thing to do for any digital property, but those really text heavy pages or blog articles even, where we have a lot of text, this component can have a really nice impact there. So that's fonts. Now let's move to something else that speaks your brand really heavily on your digital properties, and that's going to be visualizing your brand with the next image component. Historically, getting images right has been difficult, of course. There's a lot to handle there. There's optimizing images, there's handling layout shift, there's all of those types of things. With the next image component, we're done. Images are the heaviest assets that your site will need to download to bring your user that final experience. They're the biggest change you can make to your UX, in my opinion. And with both both the next font and next images are documented carefully, so you can make sure to go check those docs and implement these as you see fit. Like I mentioned here on the slide, I have that we're preventing layout shift. We're automatically optimizing images for various devices, right? I don't need to serve a full desktop size image to a mobile device. That's too much information for that device to be downloading. And so why don't I go ahead and just bring you a smaller image, because you don't need the rest of it, right? We've heard feedback as well about our previous versions of the Next.js component. We've iterated on that. And now the next image component is easier to style than previous versions. I know for me personally, I kind of battled it a little bit sometimes, but this new version is really nice to use, and it ships actually less client-side JavaScript, which I was actually really excited about. This works with both local and remote images, as I've noted there, and again, works in both app and pages directory like you know and love. So at this point, I'm thinking of catalog pages, like on an e-commerce site, having all those products. And as you can see on my slide there, I used vercel.com/templates, but it's sort of the same layout as if I had, product images and stuff. And you can imagine if those were all creating layout shift as they're loading in particular on a mobile device, say, we would be seeing some really bizarre page length, page jank as we're trying to scroll through and find out about the products that we love and want to buy. Well, if we have that stuff figured out and handled, now we can have our site visitors focused on conversion rates and traveling down our happy paths instead of battling our pages and work being, why is this loading so poorly? Let's see. Just going over my notes, just trying to make sure I didn't miss anything. There's a lot here, of course. Pages are optimized and served for excellent performance now, right? So we've taken care of our application correctly. Our fonts are loading right with no layout shift, and they're as fast as they possibly can be. Your images are optimized. They're being served with the right performance for the right devices at the right times. Folks are loving these pages. Now it's time for this application to be shared, right? And we're going to need some really nice open graph data, metadata, to come along with those links so that they look awesome. Well, I'm not going to lie, I'm cheating a little bit here. This isn't exactly a Next.js feature. You can use this with other stuff where maybe you can't. I'm not actually sure, but this is the Satori library, and we've wrapped it up with @Vercel/OG, and you can use it as a first class feature of Vercel today. And this just fit the theme of strengthening your business's branding on your digital property too well. I couldn't pass it up. So on the right here, you're seeing an image of the custom tickets that we generated for Next.js Conf this year. Anyone that signed up for Next.js Conf got a custom OG image built specifically for them so that they could feel more greatly connected to the conference. It was awesome. People were sharing these like crazy. If you're on tech Twitter, then you probably saw a bunch of these tickets. But we applied this to our conference. You could apply this to product pages. You can apply this to blog posts. You can apply this to really any page of your site. So what you're going to end up with here, if you want to play with this, you can do so right now. If you visit, I believe Amy's going to help me out here again, ogplayground.vercel.app. you can visit this and you can play with some code. Tailwind works right inside it. And there we go. Amy got me. And it's really, really, really fun to use. It makes it so that, as you can see here on the right, I have a custom ticket that was built for, it looks like Ivan there, for instance. That ticket, we wrote that ticket once, and it was able to pull the GitHub data and the GitHub profile for each of these users. And now we have the opportunity to create something custom every single time. As you can see, it's using our Vercel font typefaces, and we can dynamically at the edge render these to create custom eye-catching OG images. And additionally, these will be customized to each page. So we can programmatically bring in props to a React component under the hood and generate these without having to actually go build an image in Figma or Photoshop or Adobe, right? We can, instead of going and having to build each one of these, we can, I mean, this is impossible to do for these tickets, right? Because we could never go around and chase everyone. But I'm imagining product pages, right? Instead of having to go and ask design for an image bespoke for that product every single time, we can end up with these just automatically generated based on the props that we pull in the data that we fetched. And I believe, if I remember right, the number was 800 milliseconds was what we were rendering these at the edge at. So instead of doing this the old way where you had a headless Chrome instance and it was really heavy, it's expensive, we're using Wasm now to render these at the edge, and we're seeing sub-millisecond compute time. So this really speaks your brand loudly as your as your links start making it out to places where they can go viral on Twitter or wherever else, right? So that's my little summation there to all say, with Vercel and Next.js, your brand has never been stronger. I'm seeing some questions in the chat here. What makes Next.js so impressive? What's the difference between Next.js and React.js? So Next.js is actually a quote unquote superset of React.js. React is a rendering library in which you get a lot of control and power over what is rendered in the browser. Now, it's rather freeform, actually. It's really interesting comparing Next.js and React, because with React, you can do almost whatever you want. We've abstracted the DOM in React.js. And when you stack Next.js on top of React, you bring, in my opinion, a little bit of sanity to the freeform nature of React. You can have one way to do data fetching, for instance. And with that set in stone, your team has one way of doing something. And so there's a greater opportunity for your developers to work together. And if I'm, on one team and I got moved to another and we're working in a Next.js code base still, we're going to know how data fetching happens, generally speaking, right? So it brings some sanity and some clarity and a few opinions around React, where in React, you can kind of end up with a lot of different individual opinions, whereas Next.js, you have some opinions built in and you have some sanity that's brought to that code base. So for me, that's what's really been interesting about working with Next.js at scale. So now we've taken care of your brand and folks are excited to share and interact with your links on social media, other places where links get shared, right? But we've got to get data to these pages. We got to talk about data. We got to talk about data sources and how they're going to interact with this brand new, sweet and shiny, awesome Next.js front end. And so the strategy and the architecture that I love to use is this composable architecture. A little bit of level setting for the folks out there that haven't gotten to work with this architecture, or otherwise, maybe we have some fairly non-technical folks in the audience, perhaps. But what we can do is, instead of having this one giant monolithic architecture where everything is all piled together in this one amorphous glob of code, we can end up with a front end that is separated from all of our backend services. Our front end is what the average user would identify as your app, right? It's front ends are things that users touch when you pull up a website on your phone or your browser. That is a front end. Now, on the back end, you're going to have data, content, business logic, all sorts of things that a user would never touch. There's servers back there, there's APIs. But when we put together a front end with a back end, we can use an API to put these two together so that that front end can ask that back end for whatever data it needs. And so this creates flexibility. I think this is really where this is going to shine. Your business now has a simpler architecture, and it becomes easier to handle consistency across your applications. At a certain level, your business layer can start to pick and choose which services to use and when, and which ones you prefer, which ones you don't. On my next slide, I'll kind of bring a little bit more color to this. But the DX here is tremendous. These data stores are now agnostic to our front ends, and they allow us greater flexibility. Ultimately, this leads to improved UX, and the business layer is going to see improvements in those overall metrics because we've built something that is dynamic at the speed of static, which we'll also visit later. I'm seeing some more questions. Thanks for the outstanding framework. Internationalization is a major factor in our organization's sites. Multiple subdomains and a www, dozens of applications running under it. And some of those are Next app with the base config. Oh my goodness, I scrolled down and there's way more. Okay, here we go. Any insight into internationalization for Next 13, if we'd be able to put a locale at the start? Oh, okay, great. So internationalization with the app directory, that one, and you have the GitHub discussion right there. That one we haven't gotten, at least as far as I know. It's being worked on. Again, in the pages directory, you can still get all of your internationalization stuff done. Rest assured, we know that internationalization is a really important part of a global application and a global company. And so we definitely are going to be addressing internationalization as time goes on. Unfortunately, early days, I don't have timelines, so I won't be able to give you that. Are all the new features backwards compatible to 12? Sean's asking, or should we have to upgrade first? So I did mention earlier those features, namely the app directory that everybody's really excited about. That is incrementally adoptable. And so go ahead and check the docs for the upgrade guide at nextjs.org. And you'll find that a lot of nearly everything is backwards compatible, or there's an escape hatch to make it backwards compatible when you're moving from 12 to 13. I'm imagining, I'm thinking to myself, next image, for instance, has next/legacy/image on it, so that if you don't feel like moving all of your images today, you can, instead of using next/image, you can make it next/legacy/image. And over time, you guys are able to address those components. So I'm going to keep moving through my slides here. So we've got this composable architecture that we want to use, and this will end up being extremely nice to use in the app directory as I keep moving. I know I'm seeing a lot of questions, more technical questions, and I'll connect the dots here on this composable architecture. Don't you worry. So Next.js 13, awesome choice is the head for your headless stack, right? What we have in this graphic here is a seamless integration of any of that data you might want to bring in. You're only going to end up limited by the creativity of your designers and your developers. So what we have here is, whether you're in e-commerce, you're in content, press, media, doesn't really matter what you're in. Any data store or data that you need to pull into that Next.js app, Next.js has great data fetching capabilities to it that allow for server-side rendering and getting things done in the most performant ways possible, so that you can have the best UX that you can get to. And I made just a generic API in the bottom right there to just kind of call out that really you can connect to anything, whether it's a third-party solution for your authentication, whether it's your Shopify e-commerce store, and then you have blog.yourcompany.com and you're connecting to Sanity or Contentful to build that blog and handle your content there. So with this strategy, you can end up more flexible. I think what becomes even more interesting for some businesses that we've been talking to about this is this allows for omni-channeling, right? If you have your .com, you have your main website, you can go ahead and plug your Shopify site into that website, right? But you also have a mobile app that you need to handle. Well, you can use that Shopify API just like you were for your Next.js app. You can go ahead and build your React Native application or whatever it is that you guys are using to build your mobile app. You can use that same exact data store for your Shopify behind that Shopify API and use that over there. So you end up with this really nice ecosystem where things start to kind of just make sense across teams, across really all parts of the business, across all of the engineering department as well. So now we've got an idea of how we want to build this system, right? We're going headless. We've got a great framework picked out. We're picking out the underlying backend pieces that we want, but it's time to deploy and make sure our infrastructure is right. With Next.js and Vercel and a headless architecture, our business is going to be prepared. We can move with changing markets. We can address anything that our business comes up with that we need to build, and we can do that in a timely fashion. So what do we do to get this deployed? So now Next.js can pre-render static pages as well as create pages that can periodically update for incremental update patterns. This means you can get pages that are dynamically updating, but are delivered to users at the speed of static. I know that was a lot. Don't worry. Vercel's global edge network ensures that pages are served from a geographically close location to your users, bringing them those pages from the data center that's closest to them. If I have /blog/article1, we can make sure that we have that page cached globally. If I'm in San Francisco, I know some of our folks were from, there's a data center in San Francisco, you can pull that page, maybe the server is right there in your basement. Server for the internet is right at the bottom of your building, and you can pull that page right up 3 floors and you can have it. And so by caching those pages closer to users, they're going to get them sooner. And as we learned, milliseconds mean millions. If we're cutting down the time that it gets to, cutting down the time that it takes for those pages to get to our users, then we are effectively moving our KPIs forward to where we want them to be. And so if we continue to shrink those milliseconds down, we're continuing to make opportunities for our business to be successful. Those conversion rates can climb, those page views can climb. And I think what's really interesting here is in the past, we had to place sort of this speed and dynamism at 2 opposite ends of a spectrum. But now with the combination of Next.js and Vercel, we can create these dynamic experiences for our users that are just as fast as static sites and we can increase that personalization and really turn that knob so that folks are seeing what they need to see when they need to see it. And so I'm looking the most at geolocation, A/B testing, and feature flags in this slide. When we start to dial in experimentation, feature flags, we can handle those at the edge so that we're not creating layout shift on our pages. We don't see spinners for features that are behind flags. We don't have to slow down those page load speeds just to handle experiments or to handle feature flags. We can have those pages load with all of those experiments and features as first-class citizens of our pages because those pages are cached are cached at the edge. And we can have all of those dynamic experiences ready to go out of the box for our users, and they can be updated on the fly. We don't have to do rebuilds to get these things done. And if our code base changes, okay, sure. But if we're going to flip a feature flag, if we're going to create a new experiment, we don't have to rebuild our entire website and redeploy it. We can dynamically be doing all of these things behind the scenes and still be delivering outstanding page speeds, which again, KPIs, right? So moving forward, bringing this back to Next.js 13, React Server components play a big part of this. We can ship less JavaScript with React Server components, and we can stream UI as it becomes ready. The page that you're seeing there on the side, I'm seeing, it looks like a video streaming app. I believe you might recognize this from Next.js Conf actually. And what we're seeing here is that we had this layout ready to go for our user. And so we can show that. We don't have to wait for the rest of the page to figure itself out, go grab some data from some other data store. It looks like we have data on this page ready to go. So let's go ahead and show that to them. While the rest of everything is still fetching, we can be in a loading state, but we can give you what we have now. And the stuff that you need coming up, we can show it to you when it shows up. This approach results in fewer data fetching waterfalls, and we can persist layouts across pages. If we're going to use this same layout that you see here, I don't know, if you navigate somewhere, maybe to your watch list from here, if we're using the same layout, that layout can simply persist, and we can go get for the body of that page, that content, we can see some loading state for that stuff in particular, but that layout can stay and it'll ultimately feel like a faster experience. I think what I'm really excited about here with React Server components is the idea of more granular data fetching. As I'm mentioning, right, on this page, we have that switch accounts, right? We went and fetched for this user the account list that they can be a part of. Well, we have that right now, but we don't necessarily have, looks like in the body of this page here, we're going to have, a list of TV shows and things that they can watch. We can show them the data that they have now, but don't have yet. And so with this more granular data fetching strategy, looking back to the headless approach that we took, we can go ahead and pull from our perhaps accounts database. We can pull that information. If we have it now, we can show it now. Maybe with our actual body content, we have to do a little bit more work as far as geolocation, as far as going through the catalog of TV shows and movies that we have for our streaming app here. There might be a little bit more business logic that takes a little longer. Maybe it's just more to be done there. And so we're still going to work on that, and then we can bring that when it's ready. So that increased personalization comes from this more granular data fetching. And I think for me personally, coupling with that headless strategy, it creates a really interesting experience where as developers, we can create these patterns that work really, really well with these headless strategies and really, really well with again, feature flags, experiments, data stores that are distributed across our system. So you can now pull from many different data sources to create this UI in pieces and handle everything at the edge. I'm seeing a few more questions. If we're transitioning from pages to apps in our V13 upgrade, which folder would take precedence when rendering the page? Okay. So if you have an index page in your app directory or your pages directory, if you have an index page for both of those directories, you're going to get thrown an error. Next.js will throw you an error telling you, hey, we don't know which one to do. You're going to need to get rid of one of those indices. So if you have colliding routes, Next.js will go ahead and let you know. What's the best approach for non-Vercel CDN caching strategy with personalized content and server-side rendering? There's a lot to unpack there. I know Next.js is self-hostable. I know that Next.js can be deployed elsewhere. There's a lot for me to unpack there. That would be its own webinar all by itself. I think if you want to try out how to get these server-side renders and this personalized content and the CDN caching and all of these things, if you want to try those things out and see how they work out of the box with Next.js, Vercel is a great place to start. Go use your hobby plan and find out how the Vercel global CDN handles those things, and you'll find out that it's really, really smooth. I personally, I know I work here, but I was a Next.js user for I don't even know how long it was, years and years before I started working here at Vercel, right? I said I've only been working here for a few months. And so I was using Vercel, I was using Next.js, and I joined the company specifically because I was so excited about all of the potential that exists, all of the things that get done for developers. And so there's a lot to unpack there as far as wiring Next.js to all of that infrastructure. I would encourage you to use Vercel and just try it out and just notice that everything's kind of wired out of the box, right? Next.js is super powerful, and all of these things that we're talking about are really powerful, but they do need to be supported by the right infrastructure. And so, yeah, I'd encourage you to enjoy that out of the box experience when you can. I know I personally do, but that's my take. If we host Next.js on Vercel, is pricing based on site traffic? If so, does Vercel factor our bot and non-human traffic from traffic pricing? If so, how does a customer verify the traffic counts that Vercel reports? That is an excellent question for our product advocates. That would be there's a lot to again, a lot. You guys are asking such great questions. I can tell you that top level, I can answer the first question, is pricing based on site traffic. There's several different factors to the pricing model today. And so you're going to see a bunch of different metrics to work with there. And I would encourage you to go check out vercel.com/pricing. You'll get a lot of really good information there. A lot of stuff that I won't unpack here. Let me continue with my last few slides here because we're getting a lot of really nice questions here. Let me just round this stuff out, and then I have my question slide is next. So my thesis there was on my triangle here: your business has never been faster than it has ever been before once you start using Next.js 13 and Vercel. Again, I hope that I drew those lines that I was hoping for between these 3 points of this triangle. Milliseconds mean millions again, right? So once we get that right DX, in my personal opinion, I love Next.js. I have for years. And so I have for years, and I feel like just by default out of the box, the UX is just going to be right. And because we're doing everything right by making those right decisions with Next.js, using it in the ways that it's meant to be used, we're creating a more modern application just kind of out of the box. We're getting that UX out of the box. And ultimately, at the end of everything, milliseconds mean millions, like we've talked about. And we're going to be addressing those business goals at the end of the day just by using the correct things at the right times for our users. So hopefully I did a good job with my thesis drawing out everything there. Any questions out there? I know I've got a good few here. Let me see. I've got 2 spots where I'm looking. So let me figure out, I think I've got a double. Why the first caching of assets slow the first time? I'm not sure about what that question means, Gabriel. I'm sure. Let me just pull up my next slide. Hit me on Twitter. I bet I can answer that one. Let me look. What are the 4 top reasons a company should transition to a headless CMS using Next.js? So I won't give you a discrete 4, but I think really interestingly, as I mentioned, you get that flexibility to respond to market factors as things change all the time. Welcome to trying to adjust your business here in 2022, creeping into 2023. I know it's been a crazy year. But I think the flexibility play is really interesting. I think another thing is that the out of the box user experience is really nice. We can get that data fetched and into the application in a way that is high performance without needing loading spinners. And we can be rendering things at the edge, grabbing your most recent data from your CMS and be delivering performant pages as we mentioned, which are going to affect your end business performance. And so As far as the transition goes, we have amazing product advocates you're seeing on the screen if you want to ask them any other questions about hooking up a CMS to Next.js. A lot of the time, you're going to find that a lot of your leading CMS providers are going to have Next.js templates that you can look at. So there's going to be a lot of information out there about this stuff. More than I can cover here. I'm seeing that I only have 10 minutes left on my timer. So, but this sounds like a future webinar to me, to be honest. I don't know if my friends are listening. During the conference, examples of next image component presenting smaller images such as WebP. If we use a service such as Cloudinary, would it still make sense to utilize the next image component still? This is an excellent question. So this question centers around loaders for the next image component. In the documentation for Next.js, if you go look at the next image documentation, you're going to find a loader prop, and it will work with next config, excuse me. You can set up loaders for remote assets. And so, yes, you can be using the next image component with your Cloudinary, with your other asset provider. Excuse me, I've been talking too long. With your other asset provider. And you can bring those in remotely, and Next Image will go ahead and perform some optimizations for you. It'll cancel out layout shift where you're looking for it. And so, yes, it totally makes sense to, with your own loader, use the next image component. That's a really good question there, Bo. What's the top value proposition for making that transition? I think this question is in reference back to using a headless CMS with Next.js. I think the top thing for me is the data fetching. Next.js, as we know, fetches data in a very sane fashion. You can revalidate your data so that it can update dynamically, but you can still get those static pages for the most performance that you can ask for. So you can do things like revalidating that page every at intervals. You can have the right data at the right times, updating when you want it. So you have a lot of control there. So I think ultimately the play that drives the most adoption that I've seen with Next.js and hooking it up to your CMS of choice is, if you're going to make that transition, you have your CMS, right, which is holding all of that data that you need for your new Next.js front end or your next application, right? You have that content that you want to use. And when you bring Next.js to that content, you don't even have to move that content. As long as you have an appropriate API to get to that data that is stored in your CMS, you don't really have to do much with that CMS. You might have to, go find a data fetching key and give that to Next.js and Vercel so that we can go ahead and grab that data. But ultimately, the transition, if you're going to bring Next.js to your application, is quite smooth. You can use your data in place, and again, decreasing risk through this headless strategy. You can use that data in place and stack Next.js on top of it and just go grab it. So you don't have to restructure everything that you have, which is really, really nice. What are some of the common issues we could run into when upgrading from Next 12 to Next 13? They're a major version, right? I know as developers, we see major version, we think, things are going to break. But ultimately, there's very few demanded changes that you have to make, right? There's a very few required things that you have to do to get from Next.js 12 to Next.js 13. We do have those code mods, as I mentioned, so feel free to look for those in the documentation. Other than that, we went out of our way to create a really, excuse me, I shouldn't claim the Next.js core team's work. The Next.js core team went way out of their way to be able to make 12 to 13 an incremental adoption. And I think that's really, really important to look forward to. I know that a lot of folks are really, really excited about the app directory and everything that that means for applications going forward. But there are things in Next.js 13 today that you can bring to your code base that you don't have to worry about too many breaking changes. Again, those code mods, if you're in a giant code base, can really go a long way. So you don't have to find and replace everywhere in your code base that you have an image. But there, I can't think of too many quote unquote common issues. If you're staying in the pages directory and you read the documentation and use those code mods, I don't believe you should run into too many pain points, at least that I've seen when I've looked around at folks that are going ahead and making those changes. So I think I have time for one more question here. Really interested in diving into the mechanics of adding personalization without negatively impacting performance. This is a really, really good question. If you on Twitter, I will share a link to a Next.js conf talk, because this idea of personalization is really, really interesting as far as moving these metrics. This personalization strategy, and bringing that to the edge so that you're not creating that layout shift and stuff like that. That we have a talk on Next.js Conf. We have another Vercel. Kylie is amazing. She's a genius. She does a really good job of explaining these strategies, because I only have a few more minutes here, but getting those personalization strategies going. Look for a Next.js Conf talk. Her name's Kylie. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it has a lot to do with, there you go. Amy has the link for you. Thanks, Amy. If you check the chat, Amy found Kylie's talk there. And she goes over how to put users in buckets for experiments. I believe that's kind of the big meat of it, but that kind of sets the scene and the backdrop. And if you understand what she does with that experimentation bucketing strategy, you're going to understand a lot more about how you can bring that personalization to the edge, where you can create those dynamic assets that feel like static for your end users. And I believe I'm being called off here. If there are any more questions, feel free to hit me on Twitter. I know I just saw, and Fallon gave you guys a YouTube link. Perfect. My teammates are so nice. And so it looks like it looks like Sean's going to tweet me with all of his frustrations for his upgrade to 13. Sounds good to me. And I'll make sure that they make it to the core team. If you guys do, by the way, if you guys do run into any of those upgrade strategies that you're having pains and struggles with, please, please, please hit up the core team on GitHub. That's where they track everything that they need to get done. Create an issue, start a discussion, everything gets triaged there. They're constantly looking forward to making Next.js as amazing as they can for us. So that would be a great place to bring all that stuff. But I'm on Twitter. Let's see. Next.js 13 looks awesome. Good stuff. Looking forward to it all. I love it. Let's go build some apps, huh? Let's go help our businesses with those apps too, and shrink those milliseconds down to nothing. Let's go build, folks. I appreciate everybody that was here today. Contact our product advocates, contact me on Twitter there. And we can help you all out. And we'll see you guys when we see you guys. Hopefully, we will see you soon. Have a good one.